How's this working, y'all? We're doing live radio at We Act Radio. I'm live on Instagram, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. And we're live at We Act Radio in Southeast Anacostia, DC. We're probably the only live radio station now because there's so many people that do podcasts.
Where are you on?
I'm on my Truth to Power page.
You're on Truth to Power on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm live now. Yes. Peace, everyone. I'm live on Instagram right now. We're about to start the interview with Brother Small. We're live at We Act Radio. So thank you very much for being able to come on in. Mr. Clemon Freeman, I'm only live on Instagram. All right, thank you, everyone. This is Patricia Patton, and you are tuned into Truth to Power on We Act Radio in Southeast Anacostia, DC. Greetings, family. You are tuned into Truth to Power on We Act Radio. And my co-host, Sharice Sr., is on the other side. So, cousin, producer, can you bring Sharice Sr. in, please, ma'am? Okay, I can see her, but I can't see anything. My camera went away. She is not available now. All right. So anyway, this evening we have a really great show on Truth to Power. My next guest is not anyone that's not familiar with Truth to Power because he has been a guest on Truth to Power several different times, and I consider him to be my Jedna. If you don't know what Jedna means, that's Jegna. You can Google it because I'm not going to tell you. Maybe you can look it up and you can figure out what that is. But he is my Jedna, and so let me give you a brief background. My guest this evening is Professor James Small. He is a scholar, activist, dynamic speaker, and organizational consultant. He became an activist in his teenage years, and he has in-depth knowledge, thought-provoking, and calm delivery, and influential elements to break the programming of miseducation. Professor Small served as the principal bodyguard to the late Ella L. Collins, the sister of Malcolm X, and he has done so many different things, you all. Like, we're just gonna have like a real deal, one-on-one, two-on-one conversation as soon as we can get my co-host, back in on this. But without further delay, I'd like to introduce my guest, Professor James Small. Greetings, Brother Small.
Sister Sharice, I'm glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, I don't see Sharice.
React Radio.
I know it. Thank you. On Truth to Power React Radio.
Truth to Power React Radio.
Brother Small,
it's good to be here.
Yes. And I appreciate you accepting the invitation once again to come on to be my guest.
Oh, you're welcome, my dear. You're welcome.
All right. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. But the first thing that I think that I want to speak about is, I was looking on your website and you have some lecture topics. And we're just going to start here, but we're going to go in other directions as well. About African sacred science and spirituality. When I did the post, I basically stated that there's a difference between spirituality and religion. And I wanted you to elaborate on that and provide information to the listeners about the difference between the both.
Right. Well, you start with, I'm big on definitions. You always start with the meaning of the word. The word religion, it means to bind back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the fundamental question is, what are you binding back to? Anytime you bind back, it means you're going to the past to study or to connect. The institutions that we know as religions started out as state attempts to control the information about African sacred science.
Mm-hmm.
You first see this developing in the Roman Empire before Constantine, in what is called the Byzantine Empire, where you
Right.
get the Eastern Orthodox Church and then the Oriental Orthodox Church, the Egyptian Coptic Church, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. All of these precedes the Catholic Church.
Correct.
Okay. And so this is where you find the state trying to control the information that a society has developed about divinity.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets institutionalized, whereas once you put something in a book and say, this is your doctrine, you lock people back in time. So when people turn to their holy books, they're really looking at science from 3,000 years ago. Well,
Okay.
science has quite developed since 3,000 years ago. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at
Mm-hmm.
mythology, folklore, a little spatter of history that tries to prove the point that there is a divinity and that divinity is connected to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3,000-year-old information that is controlled by institutions that's run by the state. And even though they have this concept of separation of church and state, that's not true. It's never been true. The state still runs that body of information that have locked people into that knowledge of yesterday without looking at the 3,000-year evolution of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, spirituality, I don't too much like to use that word, and I suggest to Dr. Patricia Newton, God bless her soul, before she passed, that we use the term African sacred science, okay? Because that's what we're talking about. The body of information that is used by religious institution that they try to control, meaning where that body of information was 3,000 years ago, because they're not adding new information, right? And African sacred science happen every second of every minute of every hour of every day. It's evolving. And so what we call spirituality, I tend to make it simple. Spirituality is your daily reality, your hour reality, minute by minute reality of what's happening between you and the rest of the cosmology and the ecology. Okay. And your understanding and your consciousness and your interrelationship with that. Spirituality involves the food you eat. Spirituality involves the thoughts you think. Spirituality involves where you got the ideas, concepts, and principles that allow you to form those thoughts. Spirituality involves your relationship to nature and nature's relationship to you and your understanding of that and how you are living that out in practice.
Okay.
But even those of us who say we're into spirituality, we're caught up in rituals of yesterday, which is ancient science, up to that point of 2,000 years, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, without understanding the body of knowledge that even produced those rituals. Everything evolved. And the one thing that's constant is change. Anyone who have a religion that's codified in, whether it's an African religion or European or Asian religion, codified in a body of knowledge from 5,000 years, 2,000 years ago, is not dealing in spirituality, because everything changes, everything transforms, everything evolves. And you have to change, transform, and evolve with everything. So spirituality is when you're alive and you're a part of the transforming of nature and the cosmology, where the human body is learning from everything and sharing with everything. You know, it's not a magic spark or fire, because if we had all of that, we would end our oppression overnight. That's not how it works.
Right.
Spirituality is your being conscious of and fully involved in your reality every second day.
Well, I noticed you have a the third eye on your hat, and that is a Kemetic symbol, correct?
Yeah, I'll say yes to that, since we don't know where the stuff we're calling Kemetic came from. It might have come from the Congo, it may have come from the Sudan or Uganda or further down south, but it is, and it's called the third eye or the eye of Haru, but it's really a mathematical symbol. each one of the little pieces represent, let me see if I can reach it. This represent a certain number. We'll go the other way. This represent a number, this does. It represents a certain number that comes out, I think, to either 99 and a half or 98 and a half when we're talking about the whole. And it's supposed to be symbolic of the eye of Horus in a mythical story, because there was no man flying around with a falcon head named Horus, okay?
Right.
That is an anthropomorphic painting of a mythical possibility of what the strength of the human being would be, because the falcon flew high in the sky. It looked like it just flew right into the sun. So the symbol of the son of the sun is a falcon, because it looked like it came down to earth from the sun.
Right.
You know? And it had this ability to soar back into the sky to the sun. But that's a mythology trying to explain nature to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The best example is the study of astronomy,
Mm-hmm.
where people study the movements of the stars and the constellations and the sun and the moon. Those, we call them priests. Africans never call them priests in Kemet or nowhere else. They didn't even have a word for priests. They were scientists. They were scholars. Just like we have scientists and scholars today, study things. And their job was to study, to teach the masses. The masses paid them and took care of them, because the masses had to plant the food, harvest the food, do the fishing, make the nets, build the houses, herd the cattle and the sheep and the goats. They didn't have time to study the stars. So they paid a group of people to do this. All right. And those people then created another science called astrology to explain astronomy to the masses. Astrology tried to explain the relationship the human being have to all of the other elements of the cosmology. When people go like, where's my moon? Is it in Mercury? What's my relationship to this planet? Well, that's all a science that our people studied and learned. But astrology is a way to explain astronomy to the masses. It's like the hieroglyph. People say the hieroglyph is the language of the priests. No, it's not. Hieroglyph is the language that those we call priests put together to explain the body of knowledge of their reality to the masses, because hieroglyph is made up of all the symbols in nature. So you didn't have to be literate to understand the language, because you knew what that thing meant in nature. So when you saw the symbol of it, you knew what the meaning was.
So let me go back. Let me go back a little bit. Sharice, my co-host, she wasn't able to join, and now she's able to join. So let me have my my producer is my cousin Cheryl. So Cheryl, you can go ahead and bring Sharice in. Sharice, if you can come on in. Hey, sis.
Hey, Sister Cerise.
I'm back. I
Okay.
don't know what happened, but here I am. So,
All right, everyone. This is Sharice Senior. She is the co-host of Truth to Power, and she is here. So, Sharice, I don't know if you were watching, but Brother Small was trying to give us a brief synopsis between religion and spirituality, and then explaining spirituality. And I was speaking about asking him about the third eye that's on his hat. So, this is a question I wanted to ask you, Brother Small. You say hieroglyphs, you say Horus, and we understand that that's the Greek name for those things.
We can say Haru and Medunecha. And our people understand. See, I'm not hung up in that way on things.
Okay.
You want people to understand what you're saying.
Okay.
We speak English.
Right.
We think in English for the most part.
Correct.
Now, most African Americans, we still think as Africans, but we've had to somehow translate that thinking in English. We don't think in Medunecha anymore. We don't think in Yoruba. We don't think in Akan. And human beings had to learn to use whatever language they find themselves in to express the thoughts, concepts, and ideas they had to express in a way that they could get it.
Right.
And sometimes we cripple ourselves by not using the tools that's available to us appropriately and to its maximum. you know.
And you know, and I find that to be so true because there's so many countries in Africa, and if we are Black Americans or the people that were our ancestors were part of the transatlantic slave trade, you know, worldwide, like where do we actually know where we come from, you know, as far as, you know, the different traditions in that culture and in that space.
Well, Black is a good adjective. We use that to describe ourselves, and people can label themselves anything they want.
Right.
And no one has a right to challenge your label of yourself.
Correct.
As African Americans, we're saying Africa is our genesis place. It's our parent place.
Correct.
It's our parent culture. It's our ancestral culture. America is our geopolitical place. America is not a race. It's a geopolitical institution. We live in it. We work in it. We pay taxes in it. We participate in the politics in it. So how can you deny its existence to you? That's crazy.
Correct.
So that's like someone saying, I'm from Jamaica. We never challenge that. Jamaica is a place. It's not a race. You see, Haiti is a place. It's not a race. There's African hate living in Haiti. There's Africans living in America. Doesn't matter whether we light skin, brown skin, black skin, because all brown is a shade of black.
Correct.
Black is the genesis. That's like saying Africa is the parent. That's the genesis.
Correct.
We've been here. We were here. Some of us were here before slavery, 1492. The bulk of us came after that time, and we amalgamated into one people. All right. Study Laurent Bennett, Shaping a Black America, the chapter on the black and the red, and he'll explain that. Or you can go to David Imhotep book, The First Americans were Africans, or the first Americans were black. You can go to Ivan Van Sertima, and there are others. Yes, some of us were here, but if you read, the white man enslaved even them, and we all amalgamated into one people. And those of us who came on the slave ships, we came from every part of Africa. So we are the largest cluster of an African gene pool anywhere in the world. There's no African country that contains the amalgam of African gene cluster as the African Americans. And so as far as where we're from, when we left Africa, none of those countries that now existed. They all came into being during colonialism after 1885. So we left Africa. There was no countries there. Africa was the genesis parent place. And if we get that clear, and even with the multi-linguistic systems and so forth, there's only one culture in Africa. Each of those systems is trying to explain the culture to themselves where they find themselves. If I live in the desert and I'm trying to explain God, I can't use a tree to do that, okay? Because I'm in the desert. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to use some sand configuration or the star configuration to explain God. If I'm in the rainforest, I'm not going to use sand to explain God because I got trees and bushes. So I'm going to use the trees and the bushes. And so if I'm on the prairie in Southern Africa, then I'm going to use the grass and the rolling hills and its relationship to the stars and so forth. But what they're trying to explain is singular. You see, there's only one African culture, and it's the culture of divineness. Okay, they're trying to explain to themselves the human being's relationship to creation, causation, and divinity. And so once we understand that, it's easier to study different cultures. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each of them have a book with a body of information. Fundamentally, the information are all the same. Okay, if you read the Quran, you're reading about the works of Muhammad, you're reading the New Testament and the Old Testament. If you read the Bible, you're reading the New Testament and the Old Testament. If you read the Torah, you're reading what they call the Old Testament. It's the same body of knowledge, arguing about a little spot in the desert in Northeast Africa. And I'm telling you, if y'all really think God gave you that shit, get on a plane and fly back there. Leave us alone, okay?
Right.
Or do you want to use the body of knowledge that you got from the Africans in Kemet who they got from the Africans all over the rest of Africa. This isn't something that was born in Kemet.
Okay, thank you for providing that bit of
Kemet
information.
is like New York. We come from all over the world to this place and we amalgamate, and all of us give it our best. And we created that enormous civilization that lasted for thousands and thousands of years.
Correct.
But it's the information that allowed it to last. It's the rules by which they agreed to live. So if you study really well any of those three books, you'll see how fundamentally African all three of them are.
Absolutely.
But you got to know history to see what's in the Quran. You got to know history to see what's in the Bible. You got to know history to really understand the Torah. Otherwise, you'll fall for the religious ceremonial okey-doke, which depends on you believing foolishness that hasn't done nothing to save us over centuries of us using them.
Well, you know, I'm very much interested
But
into.
let me do one thing now. Let me clean that up, because that didn't sound too good.
Okay.
Now, I was a Muslim imam. I went to Mecca back in 74, 75, and I was leading a mosque. And one thing I found out when I was there, that wasn't our cultural interpretation. The closest Islamic cultural interpretation to an African way is what we see in the Nation of Islam and what we see in Senegal. Those are the two most Africanization of Islam you'll find anywhere. And people need to pay attention to that, because we haven't, because actually we've allowed white people to make us reject the nation, and we've allowed white people to make us reject the Marouche in Senegal, and we haven't studied how we Africanized the thing, because it came from us in the beginning, and the white folks flip it in their culture. And when they gave it to us, some of us were smart enough to flip it back in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to pay attention, because we're talking about a body of information, right? We did the same thing with the Christian church. And if you look at the Christian church history in America, I saw a piece by Skip Gates. How could you talk about the Black church in America and never mention Africa? That is absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
The Black church in America is where we hid the African village. It's where we hid the African knowledge.
And the saints and all that stuff.
And deeper than that, because out of it came the secret society, the Odd Fellows, the Knights of Pythias. We didn't create them, but we took them and used them, the Freemasonry, and we built all those Black Wall Streets out of those churches, all of those banks, all of those credit unions, all of those communities. But we were using an African format then. Now we're using a white man Christian theological format, and the churches aren't working anymore because they gave up the African format. And so I want to make sure I don't condemn my people's history where they did so well with it.
Right.
But I want to make it clear what they did was to Africanize those institutions by taking that body of knowledge which Africans produced in the Nile Valley that the Romans and the Greeks took away, and we flipped it back to Black.
Well, I wanted to kind of go back a little bit, and we're just going to stay on this topic for just a minute, because I kind of want to bring things forward. But I'm very much interested into Kemet, which is known as Egypt, the Nile Valley civilization, and all the pyramids and things that are left there, and also the work that our brother Tony Browder is doing over there, which I think is a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Extraordinary. I just got a beautiful book from Tony in the mail a few hours ago of all of the things that was found in the tombs that is now displayed in the museum in Luxor. I hadn't even gotten to look through it. I just saw Tony's signature, and I was just, he's done extraordinary work. So you have to look at the spirit of Asa Hilliard that he carries, the spirit of Francis Welsing, the spirit of Dr. Ben, that has given him the power, and the spirit of Karakoman, that who he hooked up with. That spirit ascended upon them. Let me just say something about that.
Yeah, please.
The three of us, we're here. But do we know that we've always been here?
No, I don't know.
Right. Because if you understand African sacred science, nothing exists that didn't always exist, because nothing that exists can ever go out of existence. That's African science.
Oh, wow.
That's how white folks is trying to catch up with that, calling it the theory of one, but he doesn't know how to get there. And the only way you can get there is if you understand our science.
Oh,
You're
wow.
both women, right?
Mm,
You have babies. You carry them in your womb for 9 months, right?
yes.
The only way the human being can recreate itself is through your womb with the sperm and the seed from the male. So people say, well, God is the creator. Show me where God has created any human being, except via the woman, which then means in the African spiritual tradition that you are not something here and God is something up there. You are intrinsically a part of the thing we call God, and you're that aspect of God that carry out human creation.
Mm,
Okay? If you get that, you'll begin to understand African science don't separate you from God. It says that we each are an expression of an aspect of the divine essence having the human experience.
experience.
And if
Correct.
you read those texts well, they all say it, but they hide that from the people because they
Mhm.
want to rule over the people.
You know what?
Mhm.
From the time that I met you, and I was really into trying to understand having knowledge of self. And I know that that's one of the reasons why I attracted you and many other people, that I was seeking something within myself that you all know about, and can teach me so I can, understand it.
What we do is stimulate you. The greatest teacher you ever meet is the one you see in the mirror,
Yes,
because God lies within each of us.
right.
When you use knowledge to give God, to wake up the God in you, that's when you got the real teacher.
Right.
You see?
So I always think that I am a feminine expression of the creator itself, and men are the masculine expression of the creator itself. And then when man and woman come together, they're both that expression as a
Create.
physical expression. Yes, as
Create.
so what is podogamy or I think that's the word.
You
I'm
mean
not
polygamy?
No.
Oh,
It's I was looking at the marriage of two people that came together, and
We know what that is.
what's the word?
yeah. No,
Can you
I'm
hear
gonna
me?
look it up.
You didn't hear me just say that?
Oh,
What'd you say?
monogamy. Monogamy.
Podogamy?
Monogamy.
You can
No,
hear me.
podogamy. Well, you know what? This is probably the wrong thing because that's not what I was looking at.
Well, say what
Uh,
you want to say without looking at the word. Tell me what you mean
okay,
to say.
so what I'm trying to say is that when the marriage of man and women that comes together is the full expression of the creator itself, because it's
It's
Absolutely.
not delayed. You
Anything
can hear
else is
me.
a dead end,
It's you
and life
delayed in the
ends.
whole conversation.
but Sharice is really you're coming in kind of sketchy, hun. What'd you say? I didn't hear you. Cheryl, we
Nothing.
go.
I was trying to actually. I thought I was on mute. So
No, you're not on mute. You're speaking. Did you have something to say? All right.
no. Excuse me.
All right. So what I was trying to understand in that is complementarity. When you perfect yourself and have knowledge of self, and you attract that same thing in the masculine aspect, if I'm a woman, in that masculine aspect, and then we both are that we're both like kind of like one. I mean, maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I'm
Well,
not
no,
really sure.
I know what you're trying to say. It's see, there's another piece to understand. It's called culture. It comes from
Okay.
the word cultivate. The question becomes, what are you trying to cultivate?
Okay.
Okay. And culture involves everything that people do. Everything you do makes up your culture.
Mm-hmm.
And your culture becomes your educational system.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the side, a school over here and a school over there. Those are tools. Culture
Right.
is your educational system. What the school system should be teaching is the culture of the group. And
Correct.
culture, everything that that group has ever done and how they interpret those things as being useful or not useful to their development as a group. Some things that the group were doing 100 years ago, 50 years ago, may no longer be useful, and the group should discard it and replace it with things that are more useful to the development of the group. And so if we begin to understand the nature of culture, it's like everything, Dr. Ben used to call it the law of opposites, right?
Right. Okay.
Everything in nature has an opposite. And if you look at the teaching in Kemet, everything in Kemet, if there's a shoe, there's a tefnut. If there's an asar, there's an aset. Everything has an opposite.
Correct.
Okay. And those opposites come together and create the concept of the whole. That's why there's movements going around the world where people are trying to say like kind can create life. No, only unlike kind can create life. That's the way the universe works. You know, anything else is bringing things to an end. You know, two female cannot produce themselves. Two males cannot produce themselves. Okay. It needs the opposites to produce themselves to create the whole. This concept that we deal with that's called God, we only understand fragments of it. Most African languages refer to God as the totality of everything, okay, including you as a part of that totality. It's like, here you sit, you and Sharice. You're the sum total of your mother and father.
Right.
You know, when they gave birth to you, they gave birth to themselves. They were the sum total of your 4 grandparents. When they gave birth to your mom and dad, they were giving birth to themselves. They were the sum total of your 8 great-grandparents. When they gave birth to the 4, they were giving birth to themselves. So if you take that backwards, then all of us are simply an expression of the original expression of divinity itself. So that makes God or the divine our original ancestor. So what does that make us? So when we see the stories about a Jesus and about a Haru, it's trying to tell us something different from what we're being taught by what I call the minimalist religious teachers. All of us are the descendant of the divine.
Yes.
And all of us are expected to live up to those standards that are assigned to a Jesus or assigned to a Haru or the so many others in history. They're just anthropomorphic symbolization of a concept of an idea and principles of how the human being should function. And what is his genesis? But we don't want to really get that deep into spirituality.
No, we don't. We don't. I just found what I was talking about. I was talking about theogamy. So it's saying theogamy was the physical representation of God as man and physical representation of God as woman, the marriage to become one. So I was thinking about theogamy.
Yeah, that's religious folks in the argument. That argument goes back to the Nicene Conference.
Okay.
The Conference of Trent. And was God 2 persons, or was God 1 person? Was God 3 and 1 person? I don't even get into that foolish argument. I know that I am the sum total of my mother and my father. Okay. And that my mother and my father was the sum total of my 4 grandparents. And they were the sum total of my 8, and the sum total of my 16, and the sum total of my 32, and the sum total of my 64, going back infinitely until I get back to God. And that makes me the sum total of the divine itself with all of its possibilities.
And you know, I was thinking about that because what's going on in the world today, to me, is a spiritual warfare. And I think that the universe, God, creator, ancestors are trying to wake us up so we can understand who we truly are, and to be able to defeat, like Haru had to defeat his Uncle Set. He gained courage to do that, to ascend his father. Didn't he ascend his father from when he?
We have to understand that's a very complex story too, because people like to say Set was the devil and Haru was God. That's not true. If you ever look at any pharaoh, when he's at the height of his power, he has a Set on one side of him, and meaning he has Haru on one side of him, and he has Set on the other side. Those are the opposites of the masculine personality.
Correct.
And they must be in harmony and balance under what we call ma'at, where things are balanced. If you have one imbalance in your system versus the other, then you've got the conflict that must be fought to bring it back to the balance. And so that's why religion could confuse people, because many people tell the story based on what they want you to believe instead of giving you the tools to learn how to know. And there's a big difference between believing things and knowing things. There's a science of how to know. And that's why we invented one of the most fundamental science the Africans invented was arithmetic, or mathematics, and all of its levels, geometry, trigonometry, and all of this. And so that was a way to teach the human mind how to think logically about everything. You know?
One
And
person
so,
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just reading something which I love that came from Daryl.
Yeah, that's what I was about to read. Go ahead, read it. Go ahead, read it.
Yeah. No, it's good. It says the sum total of the divine itself and all its possibilities. Then he said Dr. Small's totally on point there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Daryl Mooney. Love you to life, brother.
Like you said, we're in a spiritual war, but the African doesn't know he's in a spiritual war for the most part. Many of us do. And the war's being fought all over the world, wherever the Africans are. But many of us don't, because our minds have been trained and organized by European religious construct. But the nobles call that a mimetic infection, that we are infected with European cultural interpretation of the world's reality, so that we end up in a worldview that's not even based on reality. And we're trying to solve a problem about reality with information not based on reality. So we need to change our information bank. That's why we need to study our history as written and explained and interpreted by African people. Because Dr. Nobles told me also, history will erase the white man's mystery and allow you to work your black magic.
Wow. You know, it's when you speak, you just put things in such easy perspective, you know, because I think that people sometimes can complicate things and can't make things as plain as it is. Now we're gonna bring in Sharice again. She had some technical difficulties, so we're gonna go ahead and try to bring Sharice again. All right, you there, sis?
Sharice, I'm missing
I am
you.
here. I am not having.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not having technical difficulties. It is. I don't know what's going on, what's trying to stop what, but I have just having. But I'm here, and I've been here the whole time. So and I've been listening to Professor Smalls, and I hear you too, sis. So
okay,
continue.
good. All right, so for Brother Small, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit because we're halfway into the broadcast. You're a priest of Oya Baba Larisha Ifa tradition.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what that means first before you go. Baba Larisha simply means, you know, the word Baba means father.
Correct.
And the Orishas. So Oya is a concept in nature that has to do with change and transformation. The Oya symbolically represents someone who's a guardian of the wisdom of the ancestors. So that's the school of thought that I study. To be a guardian of the wisdom of the ancestors. They say she guarded the gateway to the cemetery, but the cemetery is symbolic of the knowledge of the ancestors. That's where it's stored. That's what it is. So we got to make it simple and plain to people. I don't like mysteries, you know. Mystery means you don't know. Once you know something, it's not a mystery anymore. So I'm a priest of trying to learn the wisdom, at least fragments of it, of our ancestors, and bring it to our people so that they can use it to free their mind, you know?
Correct.
One of the most fascinating books, and I gotta say to Cheryl, you like this, one of the most dynamic books for freeing the Black mind is called Message to the Black Man. and Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. If every
Right.
black person in America read those 2 books, our stuff would be straight tomorrow.
we
Okay.
would hope so. That would really be good. Something that would be hopeful. Because I speak to a lot. I have a nail business. Been doing it for 36 years, and I speak to my clients about a lot of different things. And I kind of stay away from religion and spirituality, but you can't kind of ignore what's going on in my nail salon now.
Repeat the title of those 2 books.
That's what's going on in my nail salon right now, because I used to be called Nails LA Style. Now I'm called Imhotep, which means welcome and peace. And now I have 2 huge Kemetic pillars that are in there now, and I have the Harubadets.
You have 2 Kemetic pillars. What do they symbolize?
The pillars foundation.
The
right?
legs? No. They symbolize no, I'm be straight up and straightforward.
That's
the legs of the woman from which life proceeds. Yes, ma'am. Every temple's got 2 in front of them, and people be lying to people about what they symbolize. It symbolizes your leg, because when you go between those legs, you go into heaven. And when you come out of those legs, heaven sends you to this earth. Every Masonic temple you go in, you got to walk through 2 pillows, and they don't tell. And I'm a Mason, and I'll tell them, brothers know me, they don't tell the people the truth.
Well, look.
In the temple in Kemet, you see those 2 pillars. What does it symbolize? The place from which life comes. And when you go into a temple and you walk through them, where are you going?
Oh, that is beautiful.
You're going back to the source of the very foundation of the information of life itself. That's why we got to simplify. Malcolm said, make it plain.
That's so
you had that and you didn't even know.
I didn't even know. I just, I
give them names like Boaz and this ass, but explain why you got them there and what do they symbolize.
Well, you know what, you had said people need to read Message to the Black Man by Carter G. Woodson, and what was the other book?
No, Message to the Black Man by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Oh, Elijah Muhammad.
And then the Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. Okay, those 2 books will put you on track. There's much other literature you need to read, but those are 2 foundation pieces of literature that tells you something is wrong with the information in your mind and you need to change them. And they'll give you some example of the information you need to put in your mind to bring about that change. Like my being Oya, Oya symbolizes changes. Our biggest symbol is the wind. What does the wind do? Blow away the old stuff and let what happens? The fresh air come in, right? To renew yourself. So we have to constantly try to understand. Don't leave one slave religion and join another slave religion, because you could say, I'm European and be just as enslaved as you was in Christianity. Okay?
You know what? This is why I love talking to you, Brother Small, because you just hit it from every angle and it's just clear. So look, we're going to switch the gears a little bit, because I'm reading in your bio about how you were the bodyguard to the late Ella Collins, the sister of Malcolm X, and then you took over the mosque, his mosque, Malcolm X's mosque, after he passed away. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I want to get into, the Godfather of Harlem, how that has helped you to assist that.
Well, I met Malcolm when I was 16. That was 1963, summer of 63. My mother was preparing to go to the March in Washington, and Malcolm and his people was on 141st Street at Food Family Market, where I was packing groceries that summer, and they were passing out flyers against the March in Washington. But I came to New York to meet him. I'd seen him on television, told my mother I wanted to meet him. My mother was a very activist, beautiful queen, and she brought me, and I met him. He spoke to me and the other brother, Dwight, for about maybe 10 minutes. I only remember one thing. He told me that education will help to free our people, and that I should go, because I was talking about quitting school and doing all this. He said, no, education is one of the tools that will help to free our people. That's the motivation that sent me to college, because I grew up on a plantation in the South, and college didn't seem like a dream. But Malcolm X told me that I had to go further. I never got to meet him again. I went in the military. I was in the military then. I was in the reserves in high school. I went in that summer through white shenanigans. and he was assassinated while I was in the military. I came home some months later, went to his sister Ella in the OAU, became a member. My mother and my brother and others were in the organization. Before I became a member of that, I actually wrote my letter and sent it to Chicago because my cousin Albert had taken me to Mosque Number 7. So, but I didn't hear from Chicago again, and I ended up meeting them, and then that became another historical route. I became Ella's bodyguard in very short order, and I began to rebuild the OAU, mostly with brothers who had served in Vietnam. And I realized these men needed some kind of spiritual foundation. So I asked to reopen the Muslim Mosque, Inc. And there was an interviewing of many imams. And I wasn't interested in religion at all, because my grandfather was a preacher, my grandmother was a root lady, and I come out of that kind of a world. I wasn't really interested in religion. But somehow they voted for me to be the imam. I refused it. I said, I didn't put my name in. They said, well, Ella, put your name in. And I go, well, tell Sister Ella, I'm not going to accept it. I don't want to be leading any religion. So they had another whole week of interview, and they chose me again. So Haji Sham Jabba, the brother who performed Malcolm's janazah, his funeral, asked me to walk with him around the block. And he said, if you would take this for 1 year, because we trust you, while we train someone else, if the organization would be appreciative, because they knew I had studied religion before I joined the organization. I was very well versed and so forth. I could speak a little bit of Arabic at the time. And so I agreed to do this for 1 year to allow them to find and get some young man trained to do this. But the 1 year literally turned into 18 years with 11 active years.
Wow.
I went to Mecca in 74 and 75. I'm al-Hajj means Shaheed. I was granted permission by the Rabat Alim al-Islamim, the World Muslim League, to teach Islam in the West. But what I saw in the Arab world and the way Africans was treated in the Arab world, I walked away from Islam because institutionally and the non-Africans were as racist and anti-African as the white Americans. And I wasn't going to leave South Carolina racism to become a victim of Arab racism. And I agree with the messenger, but most people don't know he said this way back. He was not going to take his people from under one kind of religious colonialism and put them under another form of racism. Because when I walked into the Rabat Alim al-Islamim, this is the headquarters of the World Muslim League in Mecca, the first man they asked me about wasn't Malcolm X. Who do you think was the first man I was asked about? How is Hajj Muhammad?
Hajj Muhammad?
That's right. That's the first person they asked me about, Hajj Muhammad. And then they ask about the messenger. That was the first person they wanted to know about. You know, then they ask about Malcolm, and we had our meetings and so forth and so on, some of which I can't tell nobody because inner sanctum. But the point is, we're more respected in the world than we know. And so in America, we have this tendency, if the white man rejects us, then we reject us. And that's why a lot of people say, how you come from Malcolm thing, but you're always fighting for the nation. The nation is one of the best organizations we ever had. It has done more to save young Black men and women than any other organization in the history of America on the one-on-one. Did they make mistakes? Every group that have ever organized from the beginning to time to now has made mistakes. But we must understand the fundamental principles by which people tend to help Black folks. Now, they're not the only one. The Black church has done an extraordinary job, except we don't know the true history of the Black church. And so even I was anti-Christian vehemently until I started studying history, go like, oh God, wait a minute. The very people that created a world for me to be me, I'm beating them in the ground because I don't know who they were, you know? And so we need to restudy, learn how to be Wells, learn the Sojourner Truth, learn Paul, learn of David Walker, learn of Martin Delaney, learn McNeil Turner, learn, you know, Absalom Jones and all, and you realize these people were fighting a war for us using the only weapons available because no country in the world gave us sanctuary. We were on our own in North America. But when you study our history, we kicked butt and we didn't take no names because the biggest change in a nation state by minority people of any people in the history of the world.
Wow. Well, you know, I want to speak to you about your role as a consultant, a historic consultant on the epic series, The Godfather of Harlem.
Mhm.
And I saw your names in the credit. I finally sounded the other day. I saw your names in the credits. I already knew because we had been speaking about it, you know, that what you were doing. But I just want everyone to know that you have provided your perspective and truth about what you know about Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X, correct?
Right. Well, I got involved in this project because of my son. He had a friend named Marcon Smith, who's one of the executive producers, who was a friend of Bumpy Johnson's granddaughter, Margaret, and had been working with Margaret in her script for 15 years. So Mark wanted somebody who knew the history of Harlem. And when I taught at the Black Studies Department at City College, one of my courses was called the Harlem Community. And I literally taught it in the community. One weekend I'd be in a bar, one weekend I'd be in a church, one weekend I'm on a street corner with my class.
Right.
So I came into the project to give them a history of Harlem during that last 10-year period of Bumpy's life, because that's what the movie is about. It's about the last 10 years of his life, from 57 to 68. And he comes out of prison, and he realized while he was in prison for those 10 years, the white mafia had taken Harlem. So the story is about how he takes it back. And so I've had a lot of stuff about Harlem history I wish they'd used that they didn't, from the Buy Black movement to the Hijaz model to Lumbe Brath to Carlos Cook. I just give them all, but it was too much for them. So they wanted some character. They said the Godfather of Harlem. I said, okay, let's talk about the history of Harlem and then place this Godfather in there. And in that history, there are other players. And I gave them multiple players, but they picked two, Adam Powell and Malcolm X. And Malcolm and Bumpy were friends on the real side. They would play chess almost every Sunday.
Oh, wow.
So they weren't strangers, and they knew each other before Malcolm went to prison. So they had a history. And so much of it is fiction, but I tried to squeeze as much history in as I could. And even where I couldn't get history in there, tried to, because as the consultant, you're at the bottom of the pole. You know, you're not an executive producer, you're not a writer, you're not this. I had to just use my influence, and really the person who was my backbone and, was Forrest Whitaker, who's an extraordinary African brother.
Oh, he's so great. I love it.
The young brother, Nigel Thatch, who plays Malcolm.
Yes.
They were just so on point. So if I had a point I wanted to fight for, I could call them and say, I talked to this writer and that writer, and I don't like what I saw in the script, and they would get in and help me. So we got some good things in there. Like we know we're in the midst of the police shooting right now. So that last episode with them beating up the brother in the street and, bumping them go to jail to get him. And we tried to show the dichotomy between the nationalist movement and the civil rights movement, but with them working together with Adam Powell and the others singing. And when he comes to the precinct, this cop who had been abusive, and he hands him this envelope, he thought he got in the fight. And when he saw Call Home and he found that this black man is sitting in his living room holding his family hostage, let's do some things that send different kinds of messages.
Yes.
And there'll be more. You're going to see us go in the South and deal with the Ku Klux Klan doing the murder of the three young boys, the two whites and the one black. Now, it's not complete history, but it's what we should have done if we didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to see us deal with the bus rides when our kids are getting beat up. So we have them Bumpy interceding in all of these things. And so the story is to try and they're telling a story, and I'm there saying, okay, tell the story. But if you're going to use Black historical figures, you got to give them a level of dignity and integrity.
Correct.
And at one point, I even wrote a letter to the head of company and to all the executive producers criticizing the first season for what I didn't like. And I must say that they responded very well, very positively, and we got to work a lot better this time. But it's their movie, and I'm the little peon on the side, scratching on the door, trying to make stuff happen. And
You are not a peon.
we've got some things to happen, you know.
Well,
And
I was very impressed by you bringing Nigel to Tony Browder's conference so he can get some
right,
more knowledge and information about,
yeah,
you know, who we truly are, and kind of understanding some things that he probably didn't know before, you know.
right. It really opened his consciousness up being among you down there at Metamorphosis, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and all the people, like if you think a brother like Forrest Whitaker, most people see him, they don't know him. This guy runs 2 refugee camps in Africa, right?
Mm.
And 1 in Colombia for Black people. He has a
Wow.
program in the school system for young Black men in leadership in Los Angeles. But people don't know that about him, you know. And there's more extraordinary things about him with his quiet way. And so I've been able to ally with him and other like persons because I knew nothing about this industry. You know, I was there helping Mark, my son's friend, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we bumped into the rest of us. At that time, for 3 years before this whole thing started, me and Mark had been working together, just studying the history of Harlem. And when we finally got a meeting with ABC and they bought on, we went to Epic, they said no. We went to Apple, they said no. We went to another one, they said no. But when we got to Epic, he loved it. And we went forward with it 2 years ago.
It is fabulous. I made sure that I kept my prescription, my subscription up, so I can see, you know, this you know, this other all these episodes or whatever. But
And let me tell you one other thing before I go extraordinary that I think I take big credit for this. I insisted that these men have families and not just have these men running around having meetings, shooting each other, arguing. What about the family? At night, they went home someplace. So to
Mhm.
see Malcolm with his family, to see Bumpy with his family, to see even Chin with his family, gives another dimension to the life of these people other than just being, yes, they were gangsters. Now that was real. And some of that is exaggerated too, of course. You know, Bumpy wasn't all that big up into the drug thing, but the
Mhm.
people he was fighting when he came back home was. So the story is, how do you take over this thing from them and take Harlem back? You know, he dies in 1968, you know, of a heart attack. And he
Uh-huh.
never left Harlem. He lived in Harlem on 135th and Lenox his whole life.
Mhm.
Where others who were doing things in our community moved to Jersey or Staten Island. Bumpy Johnson walked and got his newspaper every morning in the community he lived in, and his people protected him and took care of him.
Right.
That was a different kind of character, you know. And we're trying to tell as much of his story as we can squeeze in history. But at the end of the day, it's fiction. You know, it's a movie about these characters, and fiction is always whatever. But we got a lot of little historical pieces up in there, you know.
Yeah, you know what was intriguing to me is when you said, you know, I was like, well, this brother is pushing, you know, drugs on his people in the neighborhood. But you're like, you
I'm
know,
not going to give away the ending of the
I know
stories.
not the ending, but no, but what I was saying was when I said that to you, you were like, well, the thing of it is that that was happening anyway. So why are you going to let the white man come and take over everything? Yes, right?
But when he comes home, this is what's going on. Now he
Right.
has to take it away from them. But
Okay.
I can't. I don't want to give away.
No, don't give it away.
In
Don't
the
give it away.
end, you'll see why many Africans think he was a hero.
Man, the score that Swiss Beats did was bomb, and you know, everything about it is
You
just
know, and
like,
DMX worked on that project also.
yeah, I heard him as
Yes.
well, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and Rick Ross too. I heard him on
Right.
there, whatever.
Right.
But I think it's a beautiful thing. You know, you just transcend in so many different ways, Brother Small. You know, I think that, you know, is divine intervention that we connected. You know, we connected through Facebook, but you didn't get
Mhm.
to me. And I'm so humble to say that, you know, that I appreciate all of your wisdom that you bestow on me. And I do listen to you.
You do.
And
Tell everybody. She does listen.
I do listen.
Yes, you do. Yes.
And all the information that you have to share. Some people ask me, well, how do you meet these people, or how does this happen, or whatever? I said, when get tired of what this world has to offer, and you want to offer something else besides, or experience something else beside what the world has to offer, you start to seek knowledge yourself, and knowledge yourself will bring you to a space where you are going to experience what your soul wants to experience. Do you agree with that?
And it's a struggle to build yourself. That's
Mhm,
what culture is supposed to do, to create the common denominator between people. That's
mhm.
when you're stuck in somebody else's culture, you can't do that, especially when
Right.
that culture is there to divide you from your people.
Absolutely.
So as you develop the divine understanding and essence in yourself, you learn to recognize it in others. And like when you see a mate, usually the first thing that happens with a man and a woman, the power of attraction brings them together. They don't really know what that energy is, but it brings them together. But if
Mhm.
you don't have a culture to teach you how to get to know one another,
That's right.
you don't know when the attraction brought you to what is good for you or what is harmful to you. But
Absolutely.
if you've got a culture, because at the center of your culture is your spiritual system, your sacred science understanding that allow you to evaluate yourself and evaluate the next person and
Mm,
see carrying these values, these principles that I find sacred and that I can bond with. And you can tell the difference between an artificial presentation and an actual real presentation of a human character. Because everybody put their best foot forward. It's when that other foot comes that you got the problem.
right.
So you want to see both feet and know that it's well planted in the right ethics, in the right morals, in the right principles, and you can try to build with that person, you see, through knowledge and through understanding and the wisdom that derives from knowledge and understanding.
Absolutely. And what I've learned, because I'm in my 50s now, like I told you last night. I'm like, I'll be 60 soon. You're like, what? Yeah, but anyway, not that soon. But soon enough. Um, but what I realized, what's important is that you know who you are. You know
Yes,
what I mean?
absolutely.
Not
That,
what somebody wants you to be, or how somebody wants to appear,
mhm,
because you're there. It all has to do with what you are to yourself.
right. In ancient Kemet, that's one of the by phrase, know thyself.
Right.
Okay. Know thyself. And the way to know yourself is to know the universe, to know nature. You know, when you
Mm.
get hungry, today we expand in a lot of energy and we're burning up a lot of cells. So we're going to eat and drink to replenish those cells and rest, right? But you don't kill another human being and eat them. You eat everything else in nature. So
Mm.
you are everything else in nature.
Mm.
You're one, you see. And when you understand that you're one with nature, that I drink the water, that I eat the vegetables, I eat the plant, and those who eat meat have their little steak and their little thing. My daughter called me earlier and said, "Daddy, why do animals have to kill other animals to live?" I thought we don't kill them; we buy them from somebody who killed them, but we do the same thing.
Right.
So, because everything in nature is expressed differently, but they contain the same essence. I get something from the carrot. I get something from the collard greens. I get something from the spinach. I get something from the beets. I guess each of them affect a different part of my body, right? To replenish and refresh my body. I eat the fish for the protein. I eat the poultry for the protein to replenish the cells I've burnt out in my body. So
Absolutely.
am I not nature?
Absolutely. And we're not going to get on this whole thing about veganism, but I think that sometimes people fail to understand who we truly are in the physical sense, and how we thrive off of just what you said, and physically. You know,
Well,
I have a degree in dental hygiene. I know what every tooth means in your mouth and what they're made for,
mhm.
and how it aids digestion and all this other kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But um, that's beautifully, said.
We are the universe. Today, the light from Mars penetrated your body.
Mm,
Today, the light from Jupiter
mm.
penetrated your body. Light from other constellations and stars that took millions of years to get here was absorbed by our body. Are we not the universe?
Yes, we are the universe.
So the
We
iron in me wants to speak to the iron in you. The zinc in me want to have a rap with the zinc in you. Okay. You just have to make sure that the zinc can sync.
It's just like
We
you
have
said,
the zinc and the iron be having conversations, but they're not synchronizing because their body of knowledge is too alien to one another. And
right.
that's when you must know yourself so you can recognize yourself when you see it in someone else.
And it's okay. It's like, sometimes you may be in confrontation with people, but I've realized that, when I've experienced, those types of situations, it made me reflect on me, and why did I attract this? And what was it that I needed to learn from it? And I can say, thank you for assisting me to love myself,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in a manner that someone else was not able to do. You understand
Mm-hmm.
me? So
It's like someone looking at a tree and go like, I want to cut that tree down because I want to put something there without even thinking the tree is soaking up your carbon dioxide and giving you all this nice fresh
they're
oxygen.
giving us the stuff back.
That's your brother, that's your sister, that's your friend. You should love that tree.
Yeah, give it a hug. I'm a tree hugger.
Yeah. So it's just having a clear understanding of your reality
Yeah.
and respecting the nature that you live in. Having a relationship in Africa in the days, and even in other parts of the world, we knew when the Big Dipper was in this position and tilted this way, how it affected the human body.
Mm.
We knew when the moon is in this stage or that stage, how it affects the human body, how it affects tide. So we're not separate from any of these things. And
No.
the great sacred science that we call spirituality, that body of knowledge applied and lived.
And that's what's missing. This is what's missing. And this is what I don't think that people fully understand on the Maafa, on what happened to us, how we got separated from nature, how we got separated from these
You got
different
put into
things.
a state of ignorance of your fundamental reality. And the way
Mm.
to correct that is to study history
Ignorance from your
of
fundamental
fundamental reality.
reality. Cheryl, you need to pin
History
that.
will erase the white man mystery and allow you to work your black magic. Simple.
Mm. Wow. Well, you know what? We've been talking, rapping, for about an hour now, and I could go on with you for hours and hours. Mr. Freeman, are you good, Mr. Freeman? Can I keep it moving? Because we're still radio. I might be um speaking on these streaming platforms and so forth, but I stayed loyal to We Act Radio. Do something, because I wanted to be a part of a community where you can hear somebody speak live, with no edits, and bring that voice to this community here in Southeast Anacostia, DC. So,
Well,
go ahead.
as much as I enjoy being with you, but we still have some time. I have a queen who I pick up, drive to work every day, and I
I
go pick
know.
up at a certain time when she call me. And we've been running together for about 51, going on 52 years.
Give
And
thanks.
but I told her I was doing the show, and she usually work late today anyway, so she'll call me.
Right.
Um,
Well, I wanted you to
whenever
know
she calls, I got 30 minutes to respond. So we have to,
that. All right,
yeah,
no, we're gonna wrap it up, but I want you to know I'm live on Instagram. No one can see you, but Tamika has put all these little emojis on here, and she wanted to say peace to you.
give her more love. Tell her I've been asking about her.
I know, Tamika, he's been asking about you, girl. So, Brother Small, what do you have coming up? Do you have anything coming up or something that you would like the listeners to know how they can contact you or whatever efforts that you have going on so people can join
Yeah,
in?
I got a few things, but the best way
Okay.
to reach me is to go to ProfessorJamesSmallAfricanWorld.com, and
Okay.
everything I'm doing will be posted on there. We have a trip, me and Ranoka Rashidi, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Tony Browder is going to join us in Ghana on from the 18th of July to the 3rd or 4th of August.
Uh-huh.
And then we're going to go to Egypt with Ranoka Rashidi for another 2 weeks after that.
When?
This summer. So they can go to ProfessorSmallAfricanWorld.com and the information will be there. Which is going to be a fantastic journey. To get Ranoka and Brother Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and Tony Browder all in the same spot.
Oh my God. Wait a minute. So, Brother Small, I haven't taken a vaccine yet. Is that going to be a requirement?
I don't think so. It hasn't been yet, but we're still a few months out and things are constantly changing with that. I know they will require that you have a test 72 hours before you fly. And then when you get to Ghana, they will test you again. So you have to make sure that that's clear. Otherwise, they will quarantine you for, I think, 10 days or something, or 5 days. I don't remember what it is. But we have it all written out and we send it out to everyone. And
what's the date? You have the idea what the date is? Or do I need to go to the website?
18th of July through the 3rd or 4th of August for the Ghana part. And then the Egypt part begins, I think, on the 3rd or 4th of August and goes for 2 weeks. With Brother Ranoko and Dr. Jeffries. So, a lot of this is still predicated on the COVID, and we are hoping that things stay as constant as it is right now. We'll be doing it.
Well, I would love to join you all. I told myself this year I'm trying to travel as much as I possibly can, because this COVID thing has just kind of just put me in a space that I miss the sun, and I'm a sun girl. I grew up in California, and not being able to lay out in the sun and stay in the sun has kind of made me kind of,
No, and there's one more thing I'd like to mention because I do this every year. This is the 56th year.
Okay.
And very few Black people do anything for 56 years.
That's how old I am.
Wow. We do a pilgrimage to Malcolm X's grave on May 19th, but it's going to be closed to the public this year. We're only taking 50 people, but we will be live streaming it. And it's an interesting pilgrimage that we do every year, the same year.
I've been.
The same way, the same ceremony. It started out just as Islamic and OAU, but I've incorporated the Yoruba, the Akan, the Voodoo, the Native Americans, all paying tribute to him and Sister Betty. So
it was a beautiful experience. I appreciate it. Do you still do the walk through Harlem?
The December 12th do that. That will be going on too, and Fred Hampton Jr. is going to be with them this year.
Oh, beautiful.
That will start at 1 in the afternoon to 4 on 125th Street.
Okay.
So just go to Professor James Small African World, and all of this will be posted there.
Well, Sharice, I'm sure would love to say thank you as well. Unfortunately, her internet wasn't really working too well. But I want to thank you from my bottom of my heart. Thank you again for being a guest here on Truth to Power.
Oh, thank you, Patty. And thanks, Sister Sharice. Tell me we got to do this again so it could just be me and her. We're going to put you this time.
I know. You guys had your time before. That's all good. It's all good. But you all, we've been able to enjoy all the wisdom that Professor James Small, has provided here on Truth to Power here at We Act Radio. And his website is ProfessorJamesSmallAfricaWorld.com, where you can go and see what's going on with the trips that he just, briefly spoke about and all the other things that he has to offer to our beautiful people. So thank you again, brother. And be safe when you're on your journey to pick up your wife.
Thank you, Sister Patricia.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to say, Patty, let me go early today because you don't want to get in trouble.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and love. All right, everyone. We have come to